And we're live.
Jeremy.
Tuesday, November 12th, 10 a.m. AI
Uh,
Reality Check 2024 year in review.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of weird that this is the last of the live streams that we're going to do this year, at least the last one that we've scheduled.
And I'm Jeremy Obsorn, and you're Andrew Miller. I'm Jeremy Osborne. That's AI.
Oh,
AI.
wow.
Here's the first reality check. We had
That's right.
AI. We had
Yeah,
AI do all of the subtitles and lower thirds. Oh, look at that. AI is so good.
yeah. It's amazing. It
It
definitely
fixed
has
it.
gotten good, hasn't it?
Why are we here? It's been a year and 3 months or so since we started talking about these new tools, ChatGPT in particular, but also some other ones. What are we doing here, man? I thought this was all just supposed to take care of itself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so obviously we haven't looked at every single thing, but we've certainly tried to look at a lot of the reasonable, usable things. And yeah, I guess we're going to be asking the big questions, right?
Well, I think the big
But
questions that we have been covering this off and on, and we know that this technology has zipped by at a remarkable rate. Even for someone who has the luxury, I guess, or whose job it is to investigate and keep track of these tools. Even with that, it's extremely hard to keep up. And so I think part of our goals here is to, look at just the changes in technology, in particular ChatGPT, but we'll look at a few other ones that have taken place, and primarily to try to figure out to what degree have they changed, like have they gotten better, and also have we humans gotten better at understanding how to use them? Or is it some combination of the two? Is it there's been an improvement in the technology and there's been an improvement in the way that we understand how to use them? Is that fair to
all of
say?
those things can be true simultaneously. It does make me think about how we generally were willing to listen to low quality MP3s when Napster arrived. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. Um, but anyway, we should certainly wait for folks to show up.
Sure.
As they rock in, as you rock in to this live stream, how about throw in the chat where you're from? Where in the world are you connecting to us from?
Yep. And just a little piece of homework, or not homework, but I guess housekeeping. And we'll repeat this a few times throughout the live stream, but we'll be putting some questions for folks at the bottom of the screen here, the little lower third. And we invite you to contribute. So, for example, how are you currently using AI? I'd love to hear that. Are you using it primarily for work related tasks? Does that bleed over into your personal use? In other words, non work related? Is it some combination? Really curious to know a year plus after we've seen all these kind of transformative technologies. Have they transformed your life in any way, some way?
Because nobody has been looking at AI since before
Yeah,
we started showing our exploits.
clearly not.
Right?
Clearly not. We have been leading the way. That's fair to say. I
Yeah, I
should
like
point out
that.
one thing we'll do is I'm going to start sharing the screen because, again, this is a live stream and we do have some kind of I won't call them canned, but we have some very simple prompts and other items that we're going to be putting into ChatGPT Live. With any live stream, there is always the danger we're walking the tightrope, and there are few safety nets. In the past, it has one thing I will say as a reality check it does seem that just in terms of pure stability, like in terms of just when we first started doing some of these live streams, I think we almost had to cancel one because
We cut one short. I
we
think
cut
number
one. Yeah,
three, maybe we cut one short and ended up having to
yeah,
retrace those steps subsequently. But yeah, I'd say the
right.
availability of the
Yeah.
platforms, the uptime seems to be significantly significantly improved.
Hey, Kate from Chicago. Nice to see you. Well, maybe what I'll do is just as a reminder, again, as people continue to come in, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And one thing I do want to point out, again, we've been talking about how we've been doing this for, for over a year. And behind the scenes, Ramon, I need that screen shared. Is it? There we go. Thank you. So you can check out, again, our past live streams. We are Equant Gymnasium at thegymnasium.com. And specifically, if you're curious about generative AI stuff, that's the URL, thegymnasium.com / generative AI. And here are a collection of some of the things that we've been covering. And specifically over here in this section called live streams, you can see the collection of things that we've done. And I would say almost all of these are still relevant, even though the technology may have changed. And we can refer to some of these at a later point. But I just wanted to kind of put in a plug for our own content with that. We also have articles and resources.
So, Jeremy, I'm going to remind the folks who've joined us to let us know in the chat what sorts of things they're using AI for, or if they're shunning it completely. And just for reference, we don't only use AI tools for experimentation to see how we can best make sense of it to share with an audience like yourselves, but we've explored music making, filmmaking, so video generation, lots of image creation, sound effects. Gosh, what else, Jeremy? What other crazy avenues have we gone down with
Yeah,
various
I mean
AI
that
tools?
that covers a lot. I mean, again, when we're talking, the term AI, as we know, has always been nebulous, and it is constantly expanding. I do think that recently we have been paying attention to some of the text to video technology, as you mentioned. That's happening, like advancing on a rapid basis. OpenAI, who obviously makes ChatGPT, has not released their text to video platform officially yet. So I think it's still kind of, I think it's Sora. It's behind the scenes. So I think that's one area. But yeah, I mean, we've been kind of hitting all the points, I think. And at its core, we do have to remember all of this, and this is kind of worth stating. And we'll kind of maybe state this at the end as well. It's really worth stating that behind everything we're talking about, behind this last year plus, we're really talking about fancy autocomplete, right? Sophisticated, powerful autocomplete, very similar to the one you have on your phone. And I liked this example. I just did this morning, Andrew, because I was kind of curious about this.
Well,
If you,
the question really is how were you persuaded? Because given this choice, and you were doing it first thing in the
yeah,
morning,
yeah.
did you get ice cream for breakfast?
No, but to me, this illustrates the point perfectly, better than I could have predicted, because I was sitting there and I wanted to demonstrate the autocomplete feature on the latest version of, iOS 18, and typed in, "I'm having ice cream for," and in my mind, I actually wanted it. Assumed it was going to autocomplete for dessert, and
Hmm.
to my glee, because it illustrates the point that I stronger than I could have made ahead of time. The three prompts here are dinner, lunch, and breakfast. And to me, this is amazing because it actually, in a nutshell, demonstrates the power and the weaknesses of these LLMs. We have to remember every time we put in a word, there's an auto predict happening behind the scenes that assumes there's another word that comes after it that makes sense based on data that has been trained, that the system has been trained on. So here we go. I'm having ice cream for either dinner, lunch, or breakfast. I'm not sure which yet. So I don't know. I find that a very helpful reminder that all of the things you're about to see and everything really that primarily when we're talking about LLMs in particular, which is really the focus of this live stream, there is still a fundamental prediction that we have to be aware of. And it can create, I don't know, problems sometimes.
Yeah, I think
Is that
it's
fair?
yep. I think it's as an analogy or as a mental model, it's probably less technically accurate, but I do think that keeping in mind the very fancy autocomplete model is a useful way of just understanding how all of this comes to be. Whether it's predicting what the next word is going to be or predicting what the next pixel ought to be, it's ultimately trying to fill in that next piece of
Yep.
data.
Yep. And so, without further ado, let's dive in to just talk about how those things have changed. Again, we're going to start, you know, mainly focus within ChatGPT, but we will be branching out to a few other varieties because, boy, oh boy, there are a lot out there. And again, when we started this a year, 3 months ago, whenever it was, that ChatGPT was really the primary piece. And our goal is to compare some of the things we did a year ago plus to the way that it responds now. And the first thing we really just had to cover really quickly, and we'll be returning to some of these, is it also matters quite a bit which model you're using. Are you paying for ChatGPT, and what level are you, and et cetera, et cetera. And as a way to illustrate this, again, I happen to have two accounts set up here, my personal and the gymnasium account. And in the top left, if I go to the personal account, let's start there. Now, this one is kind of the prepaid, whatever they're charging now, 10, 20 a month. I can't remember.
It's 20. I think that
Is it
seems to be
20?
the going rate for most.
I think so. If you click on that top left model, you can see that there are a few different options. So auto, optimized for speed and intelligence. GPT-4o, great for most tasks. And GPT-4o mini, faster for everyday tasks. I'm not even going to try to pretend that I know the difference between these quite yet. I just want to show you the difference. So if we now flip over to our gymnasium account, which is it the team
Paid.
account? Yeah,
Paid, yeah.
paid team accounts. You'll see you get a little bit more. So you have the GPT-4o, great for most tasks. GPT-4o with Canvas, which is in beta, and we're going to look at this a little bit later, but it focuses on writing and code, which is very intriguing. And then you've also got the latest version in preview,
Which, of
01.
course, has a lower or different number than
Yeah.
40.
Yeah, the naming stuff, I'm going to say this is one thing that has, I think we could go out on a limb here and say that this has not improved.
Well, somewhere there's a product manager who left the company, like,
Nice. Yep. So we have 01 dash preview, which uses advanced reasoning, and we'll look at that shortly. And then 01 mini, which is a mini version of the preview version. Yeah. Okay.
realistically, nobody should have to worry about this kind of thing. You know,
True.
this would
And there
be
are,
like if
yeah,
you had to reach into the engine compartment of your car to change the gear.
yeah. So we're kind of maybe show you how these change and or how they differ, I should say. And so we'll stick with the 4O, great for most tasks. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put in a prompt here, which is something that we tested out in our very first live stream, which is something that designers might use, marketers might use, anyone who is web developers might use, which is what is the complementary color of pound FF5F14. Now, if you're not familiar with this convention, it's okay. This is a hexadecimal color, which is something that is a kind of a standard formula for creating colors on the web, but also in image editing and so forth. So you might imagine that if you're a web designer or anyone else and you are asked to kind of, get the complementary color for design purposes of this hexadecimal code, that there might be an easy way to do it. So what we're going to be seeing here are a series of in-depth calculations in which it's going to convert this, and the complementary color is pound 00A0EB. Now, we said this was a live stream. When we did this a year ago, the answer that it came up with was incorrect. It came close, but not. And well, actually, it depended on, I think, remind me again, like several of the models were close-ish, but none of them were 100% accurate.
Yeah, and it wasn't very clear to us why they weren't coming up with the same number. Now, in fairness, the way that you would calculate this, the hexadecimal depiction of the color, which happens to be, I'm pretty sure, the color of the reddish orange that's in our logo, that the complementary color is that color on the color wheel that's 180 degrees away from it, so directly opposite. And the way you would do that is taking the red, green, and blue values and subtracting those from 255. And that's the new number. And then you convert it back to hexadecimal.
Yep. So again, just for visual purposes, this is kind of what you would get. This is the original color. This is the complementary color. Excellent. So right now we're giving it high marks because this is the correct answer. Now, what's interesting is if we take this same prompt, and I mentioned earlier that we have a more advanced version available to us on this enterprise or this team plan, which is the 0-1 preview. Uses advanced reasoning. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw that in there, and we're going to ask the very same question. And what you should be seeing is, first of all, when you're using this most sophisticated version, it kind of gives you a little bit of a hint up there as to how long it's going to take to do this. And in this case, it's 8 seconds. What you're also going to see is, although it might look a little similar at first, I can pretty much guarantee that we're going to get a whole lot of equations in here. Actually, well, interesting. They didn't go as in depth as they have in the past. So we've got some previous versions where this went on.
So, Jeremy, this is the punchline right here. We're asking it to a question. Now, again, this isn't regular computation. This isn't like you've written software to calculate a number. Every time you ask a question, the answer effectively is expected to be different. That is the crux of it. And the number of times that we've asked this question to the various chat GPT models, and then also to Gemini, and also to Claude, and I'm trying to think which other ones. The way that it comes up with the answer is different every single time. The accuracy varies every single time. and the reasoning, the evidence of its reasoning changes every single time.
Yep.
And I can't help but think of all the people who say, well, no, I don't use ChatGPT for writing stuff. I use
Yeah.
ChatGPT for researching stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So again, this to me, this goes back to that very crude analogy I used earlier of the autocomplete. In this case, we could see when I asked it to break it down further, even though it gave us the correct answer. So yay, great. This is seems to be again, it's not 100% accurate. When Andrew and I did this last week, it actually got this slightly wrong. It was close, but it wasn't 100% accurate. When I prompted it to do it a little bit further, it's gonna try. Now it's 47 seconds of time, and boy, oh boy, look at these. So now we've got all of the explanation that you might possibly want. Look at this. This is amazing. It just keeps going.
That's the
Look at
new
that.
math that they talk
Wow.
about. Oh, look at that. You've been wowed by the
Yeah.
sheer complexity of this
Yeah.
detailed response.
Yep.
And thankfully it got it right this time.
It did get it right. So again, I think in general we can say that the technology has improved, but again, to Andrew's point, if you're using these LLMs as a search engine, which we're going to talk about in a second, or a research tool, you do have to be aware it is not 100% accurate still. You need to be very careful. We did this exact same question a week ago, and the most advanced version actually did not get it right. It was close, but it did not get it right. As another example of one, and again, we're not going to spend crazy amounts of time on this, but we're going to go back to 4.0. We had another question a year ago, which was this: how many sunflower plants does it take to make 1 liter of sunflower oil? So I want you in your human brains to try to begin to understand how you would approach this. How many sunflower plants does it take to make 1 liter of sunflower oil? I can hear the engineers in the audience like furiously scribbling away on a piece of paper.
And probably the lawyers saying there's no way that we could ever put our name
Right.
to an estimate.
Right. So it quickly responds and it says to produce 1 liter of sunflower oil. Okay, we got to take this in a variety. So one of the things that they are doing is trying to explain the reasoning a little bit more, so at least you have some context. And here is the final answer according to 4.0. Each sunflower plant yields an average of 50 to 100 grams of seeds. Okay, I can visualize that in my mind, kind of, sort of. So approximately 30 to 40 well-grown plants are necessary for 1 liter of oil. Okay. I don't really have a great way of testing that.
See, that feels a little bit low to me, but again, because a liter is quite a lot, and I'm just trying to imagine like I'm holding my hands cupped with a bunch of sunflower seeds, and now there are 30 of those. Is that enough to get a liter? Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I do want to point out that in these new interfaces, you can click on this top model, and most of the time, depending on the sort of prompt you're creating, you can actually switch the model inside the same chat. And we're going to see how that's very useful in a second when you're working with code. But here I can go from the kind of standard 4.0 to the 0.1 preview, so the most powerful version. And I can ask that same prompt again, and it's going to run it using the new model inside the same chat thread so that I could easily compare them. And again, you can kind of see that it's giving a little preview. It's just like the beep, beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop.
Yeah, they're missing a
Calculating.
huge opportunity to not have an audio option to play.
I did want to mention something, Andrew. I have been in talks with OpenAI to provide my voice. I was going to save this for after the live stream, but they actually reached out to me, and they want my boop 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 beep boop boop
Oh, they
boop
want to
voice.
record your voice
Yeah,
doing that sound.
yeah,
Oh, I thought you were going to
yep.
say that they wanted to license some music that we've made or
Nope.
something.
No, they want to license
So
my
it's just
voice.
you. I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I don't know where those
I'm going to try auto tune and
I
see if
don't know
maybe they
where.
like that better.
Yeah, we'll see. Here is the answer. So I need
Look at
approximately
that math,
25 to
though.
50. Yeah. So
I
25
mean,
to
it's got to
50
be right.
plants, 30 to 40. It seems to me like both of these are hedging these tremendously, but
Wouldn't you want to make sure that you had enough sunflower seeds to make that liter? Like you don't want to come up short.
yeah.
You would
Yeah.
overestimate.
Depends
But
on how you're
so
extracting them.
yeah, that's true. So I guess at a high level, my observation is that when ChatGPT and its ilk responds to a question or prompt, that the human-like language makes us so much more likely to believe the factual, whatever we believe what it's saying to us because it seems so human,
Yeah. Right.
and that this model leans into the world. If we can't charm them into
Yeah.
believing us, let's just overwhelm them with math.
Yeah. Formula and equations. So the consensus here is, again, is this math better? Is the logic better? It seems moderately better in the end. To me, the conclusion is still the same. Like, we can't rely on this 100%. And if you're doing this sort of some sort of equation that for a very mission critical task that you have, like, you're going to need to double check it. None of that has changed. But let's
Well,
move
one,
on
one
because,
thing one
sorry,
thing
go ahead.
has changed in a way, and that is that when we first started asking these types of questions, which require some level of association and they're somewhat referential and sequential. You have to sort of break down the thinking. That when we first started posing the question about the sunflowers into oil, that if we then it was getting the answers really wrong. It
Yeah,
was we if we broke it down to say how many seeds does an average sunflower produce, and then
yeah,
how much oil can you get from 100 grams of seeds, and then so we build the logic into our prompts that we could lead it to giving us a better answer. And in
yeah,
this case, it's understood, or at least the model knows, that it needs to break down these things in order to understand the logic of how to solve the problem. But it still sometimes gets it wrong.
yep, exactly. Shifting gears here. Come on, come on. We're now going to be talking a little bit about summarizing. And what I have up here on the screen is a website that we looked at and we used in one of our earlier live streams to talk about, where we created a prototype based on the content of a web page. In this case, it's the Priority eCoast e-bike. And if I quickly scroll through this again, I'm not going to spend all the time here, but this is a very long web page. There is a lot of marketing material. There's a lot of specifications. There's imagery. This is like a lot of content. And you can imagine if you were, again, let's say a junior designer, a marketer, someone who is responsible for perhaps redesigning this page or otherwise having to make use of the content on this page, you might want a quick summary of what's on the page. Now, if we go back to ChatGPT and we create a new chat, and let's make sure we're going to use the 4.0 model for most of these, and we put in the URL and we say summarize this page. Whoops, I should keep it misspelled and then see if it
I'm just so glad
understands.
that you've stopped being so polite.
I'd have. That is one thing that has changed.
You've been burned. Well, that is one thing that's changed. I've gotten bitterer, and you've gotten more normal when it comes to
Yeah.
dealing with the bots.
So if we put in this prompt, summarize the page, it will give us, and again, this is in 4.0, it will give us a very modest summary of around 90 words or so. And it will point us back to the web page. So this is a decent, I mean, this is like a very high level summary. One thing immediately we can say that has changed is if we go back to 2023, and we actually asked, and I'll go and I'll update the prompt to reflect this prompt, give me a bulleted list of the key features of this e-bike. But that's not really the point. The point is this here. A year ago, oftentimes it would say, sorry, I can't do that. I don't have real-time access to product information or the ability to browse the internet.
Even though it did.
Even though it did. So it was kind of, it was one of these strange things where we were on the cusp of what OpenAI was willing to allow ChatGPT to do, but there were very easy like backdoors that you could, you could exploit, let's say, or sometimes accidentally. It's not even exploiting. Sometimes it would just work.
Well, that's, and I think that was the weird part, was that even though the functionality existed, it was sometimes just say it couldn't do it, and claim that was actually the feature.
Yeah.
But I also remember that at the time they rolled out this version and then had to turn off functionality because it was doing bad things with it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. Boy, my typing skills are. I did not have my ice cream for breakfast, so
You would have been on your game, top of your game. It's not too late,
This is true. Do you mind if I take a little break?
No,
I just gotta go. Okay.
We should ask ChatGPT if eating ice cream for breakfast is a healthy choice, and how.
So this is interesting. So again, this time we asked it for a bulleted list of key features, and again, it did a pretty high level job. Six key features, and again, to cut to the chase, the improvements that we have seen over the last year is in our previous example from 2023. There were often times when ChatGPT would make up a key feature in this bullet list. And I remember you and I looking at one of the results and being like, was there really the Excelsior carbon aluminum braking pad or whatever it was? Because we don't seem to remember that.
It definitely conjured up something that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And when we asked, are you sure about, we didn't see that on the page, then very charming response. Oh my goodness, I must have. Whoops.
And I do feel like in general, again, if we're to go from a high level, in general, it does seem there is a little bit less correcting it. That doesn't seem right. Can you try again? And I do know that there have been, one of the prompt tips that we've used is kind of to almost increase the stakes for ChatGPT. So to make it, if you said, please give me a bulleted list of key features from this page, but if you prefaced that, your answers are being closely observed for accuracy, just so you know. Right? And then we ask it that question. And again, I'm using the more advanced engine here. So there does seem to be some evidence that this does seem to increase the quality occasionally. That if you're putting it in the context of, someone like a board of experts are looking at your answers, or something akin to this, that it's going to try a little harder. Now, again, in
Or
this
at least
case,
tell you that it
yeah,
is.
exactly. Tell you what you want to hear. So it does seem, again, in this case, instead of 6, we've got 3, 6, 9, 10. So I guess, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to really take some extra time and do this for you. I will give you one little tip when it comes to the summarizing. So again, a year ago, we didn't really have the option of summarizing consistently. And what that meant was a year ago, we couldn't really offer you tips on how to use the summarize feature because it just didn't work or was unreliable. I'm going to show you just a really quick example of something that I feel ChatGPT is now fairly good at doing. And so this is a real world example of a web page that I was given responsibility for organizing, and it's the member area of a radio station. And like many kind of low stakes, or I should say like volunteer websites, the links here had very little organization. They're just a bunch of links to stuff, the bylaws, the copyright information. There was really no rhyme or reason to these. I would have to click on each link and try to understand like what it was pointing to in order to understand it. And so to me, this is a very good case study for like, hey, let's give this to ChatGPT and see if it can make some order of it. All I really want are sections for these links in a really, really quick way. So you're kind of able to do that. And I'm going to share my screen here. And so I'll kind of just show you 2 stages, and hopefully these can come in helpful for you. If you just ask it to reorganize a web page, this will give you some very generic advice. Okay, do this, do this, do this. Great. However, if you supplement that and you give it some context, this is a members page for a community radio station. I'd like to optimize it for user experience. Okay, so this is a much more specific piece of advice, and then you give it the URL. And what it's going to do is it's going to quickly look at that or summarize the page. It's going to tell you what it thinks it is, and you can kind of fact check that. So it's a collection of essential links for DJs and staff, but it could benefit from better organization for ease of access and navigation. Agreed. So here's a potential reorganization plan to improve the user experience. And what it will do is it'll give you 4 or 5 high-level categories of things that it thinks you could do. Truth is, I ignored or did not need 2, 3, 4, or 5, even though they might have been useful in a different scenario. All I cared about was this. It quickly analyzed that page, and it gave me some suggested sections or headings for the various links on that page. So health and safety, broadcasting guidelines, etc. To me, this was hyper useful. It was something that took this uncollected mass of data, put it in some sort of format, and again, it kind of worked out. Just so you can see, this is kind of like the final version of what it did. And to me, this is perfect. This is great. Just do this one thing that I really don't want to do and tell me how to section off this web page. So I found that super useful. Little tip.
And of course, you can do that by copying and pasting a bunch of stuff into that as well. So it is very useful. And again, it's because it's about looking at the relationship of words to each other and making some sort of connections.
And also worth pointing out that what has remained true, and potentially even more true, is the training data that is being used for these systems, and the fact that things like web page organization, the content of marketing copy, all of these things are fairly low-hanging fruit for the training data that gets used to build these models. So
if you want to
that's
write a romance novel, for
Yep.
example, Jeremy, is it going to come out we're using language from marketing, from web marketing? I'm just worried about what that does.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many romance novels are actually trained. I mean, maybe there's a lot. Maybe we could have a romance novel in the form of marketing language. That sounds
Wow.
like yeah. I know, blew your mind there, didn't I?
Well, maybe that's why it gets the complementary color question wrong, is because it's trained on romance novels.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Moving on, we are now going to switch gears and talk a little bit about some of the new ish and under development features related to coding. Now, again, this kind of deserves its own live stream, and it's also worth pointing out that this is the beta model. But we did the same prompt, and we made a web page from the results of this recipe that I'm about to show you. Again, I think it was actually about a year ago today. It was for our November, December
That's right.
2023
The
special.
holiday themed salad.
Yes. So please give me a recipe that can be made in less than 10 minutes for a tasty winter holiday themed salad that will serve for adults. And again, I'm just using standard 4.0 here. And we can see a festive winter holiday salad.
Every
really
time
hope-
it's the same thing.
Yes. Just so that our listeners know, goat cheese is Andrew's favorite food.
It is my favorite. It is interesting though that it threw in the all feta, in case Andrew's watching. But
Yeah.
so the first time we did this, I think it was goat cheese. Like, do you have anything better than goat cheese? Like, goat cheese. Yeah. And
So
I guess I
yeah, go
shouldn't
ahead.
say it's not always the same. Obviously, I mean, a holiday themed salad, I think that's a very thin section of the cookbook, but
Yeah.
there is some variety every time, but for the most
Yep.
part, it seems pomegranate seeds are
Yeah,
the
most of the
obsession.
time. Yeah, it does
And
seem to
the
kind of
goat
make
cheese.
some mixed, a mixed green salad with, some nuts and
Red things.
red things
Yeah.
in it.
I mean, it made
And
assumptions about a holiday theme, which is interesting too.
Yep.
But
Yep, and we chose that strangely worded phrase on purpose, and so but it does a
Yeah.
good job. And then what we now would like to do is say, okay, so we can imagine that we wanted to publish this. Well, first we want to turn it into an HTML page. So we would say, make me a responsive HTML and CSS web page for this recipe, and just see what happens. Because again, it took us a little bit of time to do this a year ago. And what it will tend to do in its default mode is just give you the HTML and CSS. It assumes that you know how to copy the code. It assumes basically that you know what to do with that information. And it's kind of generating this.
so far, that looks like pretty decent HTML.
Yep. And again, it separates the CSS into a separate style sheet, but once again, it kind of assumes that you know what to do with this, and it's not really going to help or do anything else. It just tells you how to do it. Okay, which is fine. So, and again, a year ago, what we did was we copied that text, we put it into a text editor, we brought it into the browser. Really, like at first blush, it looks good, but like it's a lot of code. So, as I mentioned before, ChatGPT now has a new model. And actually, maybe I'll just do I'll make a new chat so we're not. got this model, Chat GPT-4o with Canvas. And so if we set that as the model and we put in, actually, I guess I can't do that. I have to make it do the recipe first. That would be nice. Well, maybe I'll try it in this same model. Let's just see if that works. So I'm just going to say do this again. Cross my fingers and hope that.
This is where all the not saying please.
Yes,
happens.
I know. I did it. That's good. Okay, so you may have caught it there. It kind of flipped into a different mode. And on the left-hand side, we now have our prompting channel. So it's a very narrow
Transcript,
chat.
I guess? Yeah.
Yep. And there's also a link to the web page. And what has happened is on the right-hand side, the screen has maximized to the full code view. And what you'll see here is on the far right bottom corner, you have the series of 5 buttons. And when you're in this mode, each one of these will do a different thing, which is kind of interesting. And we're not going to spend tons of time on it, but I'll just briefly go through what it does. You can add comments, add logs, which is typically used for JavaScript stuff, interactive stuff, fix bugs, port to a language, and a code review. So this is always very interesting. Here's a code review of a thing you just created. So one example of this for folks who are in design and development, that's kind of always interesting. Actually, what I noticed is it didn't do the style sheet. So let's just kind of, so I can go in and say, make the style sheet. So this is the styles that will be associated with that page. And it does that fairly well. And if we go in and say, okay, great. Now, something that I used to teach my design and development students quite a bit was this, adding comments. So going into your code and adding some sort of non-machine readable commentary. So for humans only, that explains what the different styles in this page are doing. And usually that's kind of a hassle to do by hand. There's a lot of them. That's right, you have to double click. So you double click that little button and it's going to go in and you can kind of see it happening in real time. Am I catching it? There we go. I mean, this is amazing. Really, really kind of mind-blowing to me that what it's doing is it's essentially translating the styles that it sees or has created, and it's telling you in human terms what that line of code does. It's increasing the line height for better readability. Padding around the body. These are, I'm going to venture and say, these are better comments than the vast majority of designers and developers would make, just in terms of context.
Absolutely. And as a learning device, you think about if you're learning CSS, for example, or any coding language, and you're trying to understand it, that if you take an example and give it to ChatGPT and ask it to comment the code, it will explain to you effectively what that code is doing.
Yep.
So it's not just for the benefit of adding comments.
Right. Now for context, and got to be careful of time. But I do want to show kind of the direction, and we also promised that we weren't just going to live inside of ChatGPT this whole time. We did want to show you, because both Andrew and I were pretty impressed with an alternative version of ChatGPT called Claude. Do you remember anything about these folks? I can't quite remember.
Hard to pronounce company name.
Okay, that
and
sounds about right.
Anthropic. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's certainly a contender, and I think that over the last year, um, there've been huge strides on this platform. I think the
yeah,
thing that what we've discovered is that many of them seem to have particular strengths and weaknesses, and
yeah,
sometimes the strength is really just a better interface, and sometimes it's really about the functionality.
yeah,
And so I think Claude is.
yep.
Oh yeah,
Although
well,
no, it's
three.
joking. All right.
But we think that this is a platform that's definitely worth a close look.
And luckily, just nudging it a couple again. So here's why we like this. Because first of all, again, it does a very similar job of giving you a recipe, but it will also give you a preview of this so that you can see over here on the right hand side that there's this preview version of the recipe that we just created. And you can flip over to the code version if you like, but the preview version is really a nice way of understanding, like, well, what's this thing that I just asked it to make? The other interesting thing that we found Claude does is on the lower right hand corner, there's this little publish button. And so Claude uses these things called artifacts. And what an artifact is kind of the way it sounds. It's an artifact of the prompt you just created, in this case, a web page with its HTML and CSS assets. So you can see when I publish it, it's going to say, okay, well, publishing this will make it accessible to anyone on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. If you publish and you copy that link, and we now have that link available, I can send that to someone on my team, Andrew, whoever, as a dedicated web page. I'll just see if I can jump into that real quickly. Oops, I may have done it too fast. There we go. So there you go. This is, again, a standalone web page with a little placeholder formatted. It's responsive. Hopefully this works.
It's pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing. And again, there's a whole level of things that we haven't explored yet, like remix artifact. Don't know what that is. Sounds kind of interesting. So yeah, so this is a long way of saying that, for the most part, we are seeing this diversification of assets. It's the same thing with imagery, in the way that ChatGPT has been using DALL-E as a way to generate images. I think it's fair to say, and again, we have to be careful of time, that we've seen ChatGPT become like the Swiss Army knife of LLMs. It does a lot of things. It has a broad scope of doing things like fairly well, like the code generation, image generation. But a year plus later, with the example of something like Claude, we're starting to see some serious competition in different sectors of the field. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there will always be a reason to use a specialized tool for a specialized purpose as well. So I think that's we start to see the integration of all these different functions where, like, so Gemini can produce images from in a chat, and it uses a model called Imagen 3, I think,
Yep.
to do that. Maybe the paid level of Gemini only, I think, but
Yep.
and Dolly and ChatGPT. But ultimately, if you want the best control over still images, then I think Mid Journey is really hard to touch. There's
Yep.
various versions of um, uh, Stable Diffusion that are pretty good for certain types of images. Even the image creation world has become specialized, where there's certain
Yep.
platforms that are better at certain styles or certain treatments, and the same will go for video, same will go for
Yep.
sound as well.
Yeah, and we should also mention again something that, and on a similar level, the addition of a search engine capability, which happened, I think, officially last week for OpenAI, is something also worth explaining, because what many people are drifting towards, and there are entire companies, AI based companies that are drifting towards, direct competition with Google and search engines, and using AI and LLMs as the foundation for search. And it makes a lot of sense to do this. Having said that, we have an example here that is an interesting, I say, comparison between the two. So what I did was I put in this prompt: I need to buy an Ego 56-volt battery before 5 p.m. near me. And so what it's going to do at first is it's going to say, okay, to do this before 5 p.m. in Boston, Mass, consider visiting the following retailers. So what you're seeing here is new. This is a map, that traditional map interface that you see in search engines like Google Maps, but it's now embedded inside of the chat window. So kind of useful. It you do not need to jump out of ChatGPT to go find this. However, I'm actually not in Boston. I'm in a suburb of Boston. And so I prompted it to give me a better, I said, can I give you a better address? And it said, sure. Now, I didn't give it my specific address, but I gave it the town that I lived in. And it said, okay, so to purchase this battery before 5 p.m. near Acton, Mass, consider visiting the following local retailers. The first one was in Lowe's, in a town nearby called Westford. Not super familiar with that. Then I saw this. The Home
It's
Depot.
so amazing. All this time, there's a Home Depot in Acton.
Now, I've lived here for 15 years, roughly. I know there is no Home Depot in Acton. There is no Home Depot in Acton. And again, this is a major problem.
But it's a search result.
Yeah, and
It's got to
ironically,
be true.
if you click on that, the irony is it will take you to the Google Map. All of a sudden, it's like a complete mess. It will jump out. It'll go to the map search. It's looking for the Home Depot in Acton, Mass, which doesn't exist, and it's showing me the Home Depots nearby, but that's kind of not useful. And so it's kind of worth pointing out that something like Google still has the advantage here. If I just go into Google and I share this tab, I did the exact same prompt. I just copy and pasted the prompt into the search, and it's gonna find the correct hardware store in the correct area with the correct opening and closing hours. So again, it seems to me that, granted, this is fairly new. I think this came out last week, but I mean,
Well, and when
buyer beware.
Apple Maps first came out, I think people drove into lakes and things, because apparently they were hell bent on
Yep.
following the directions, even though they were driving into a lake. And
Yep.
so I guess everything will improve, presumably.
Yep. Now we are running out of time. We promised to kind of close this, but we also did advertise this as kind of a look at the year in review, and let's talk about the hype cycle. And again, what is the hype cycle? Some sort of technology gets introduced down here. People have inflated expectations about what it can do. So way up here. And then at some point they realize it doesn't do all the things that it promised. And then slowly over time, they kind of figure out, here's the thing that this is best for. So, Andrew, where are we?
Define we. I mean, I think that you and I have found ourselves on this cycle, on this roller coaster. a few different times with a few different platforms, right? So
Yeah.
that when the first emergence of like the audio creation text to music generator came out, I think we were like, wow, what this suggests is the next generation is going to be amazing. And then sure enough, the next generation of it was really quite amazing. And now, of course, to discover that maybe it's, been trained on actual music as opposed to whatever they claimed it was trained on. And, so there's the disillusionment. But I don't know, like I think image creation, each time there's a new platform. Isn't that safe to say?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the audience and from whose perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And also, yeah, too. And we were talking about this in preparation for this earlier this week, or I guess last week, where essentially the field of AI at this point is mirroring kind of the complexity and the size of the workforce and people's interests. So again, if you're a marketer, that's very different than if you're a lawyer, which is very different than if you're a designer. And so it's kind of impossible to say like where we are. Like to your point, it's almost like it's a flawed question. It's one we have to ask because we see this repeated with different technologies over the years. And maybe it's fair to say that we still have not seen anything like this in our lifetimes.
I'd
Like,
agree.
you know? And so asking these familiar questions based on kind of a different model of thinking, like we are in a different model of thinking. It's here.
Yep, talking about AI as one big category
Yeah.
it's very reductive. It would be like if we were talking about where are we with the hype cycle of science,
Right.
like
Right.
all of it.
Right. I guess my question is, where are we in the hype cycle of having ice cream for lunch?
You know what? That's the human part of you that could have acted
Mm,
on it when the machine suggested it to you. So
I,
you haven't been turned into the lemming that everyone's afraid of, AI and the bots are going to do, turn us into drones and so forth. But I guess the question I'll come back to just in closing is: have we gotten better? Have the tools gotten better? Have we changed our expectations? And I think that yes.
yeah.
Yes. So, and I guess as one last question to our audience, we've run over time, so I apologize for
Yeah.
making you late to your next meeting, if that's the case. But if there are topics, specific topics that you are curious for us to explore, use cases, scenarios, opportunities where you can see these tools as being actually supporting productivity in a meaningful and legitimate way, let us know. We're very curious. We've got lots of things that we want to cover in the next
Yeah.
season of our live streams, and obviously we'll just keep forging ahead with the stuff that amuses and entertains that we think is useful to you. But you should let us know.
For sure. Well, without further ado, that's it for our year in review for now. And again, yeah, let us know. We hope that what we've done you find useful. Please reach out to us, particularly on LinkedIn, is where we're very active these days, uh, for any reason whatsoever. And don't forget, we've got classes too.
Yep, and they're free for everybody.
Yep.
Yep,
So check us out at thegymnasium.com.
and
Until
let us
then,
know how the festive holiday salad turns out.
yes, they should have ice cream for dessert for that, by
And
the way.
please take the poll that's in the LinkedIn chat.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next